and welcome back to my channel. I'm Faye Semple, and this channel is where ancient geomancy meets the living, breathing reality of right now. So today I want you to lean into big shifts that are happening because what is happening right now in the world is not random. If, like you feel like the world has gone crazy at the moment, it can be really frightening to look at the news. We have huge geopolitical crises. There's potentially wars. We've got the breakdown of social cohesion. We've got massive tensions between the left and the right on politics. The Western world seems to be under threat of collapse in many respects. So it can be very unnerving and intimidating to, tune into the news, to see what's going on, to look around at your neighborhood. There is a mood, and part of it to do with, propaganda. It's to there is a conscious element to disrupt people's thinking through ideological and propaganda means. But actually, that's a symptom of something deeper. That's kind of what I want to touch on today. I want to touch on the sort of nature of human consciousness and evolution in how that sits within earth energy. So bear with me. So, as I say, what's happening right now isn't random. We go through cycles of epochs in human society, the rise and fall of civilizations. And this is kind of relentless. It keeps going on. We know about civilizations that have collapsed, but we're now finding out that there may be previous whole civilizations of humanity based on different technology, before the Younger Dryas, before the Ice Age, whatever. But there is these we know that we go around these cycles of time. We see it in our own vegetational cycle of the year. We see it in our own lives. We have a life cycle. Everything's in cycles. And we live inside this great big cycle of earth energy shifts that is going on at the moment. This is a sort of handover window of what are called the emperor dragons. And this window is happening, roughly speaking, between about 2024 and 2027. This is like the shedding of the skin of the snake as the new snake emerges. So these three turning years are really the one in which the old emperor is letting go. And this is the one that has governed the bandwidth of human consciousness really for the last 2,600 years. But right now it's in its death throes. It's in exhaling its final breath. While the new emperor, and these are the more wider, deeper, heart-centered and multidimensional energy lines, comes to the fore. It's already moving through the planetary crust, really like molten living light. I can see the shifts in the earth energy. So the old is dying and the new is coming through. So I want to talk about that mechanism a bit more in depth so that you can sort of feel the cogs turning in your brain, in your life, and actually, the movement of energy beneath your feet. So at the apex of the Earth's energy spectrum, so we've got lots of different kinds of energy. We talk about earth energy as if it's one thing, but of course it's not. There is a huge spectrum, an indefinable, infinite number of combinations that sort of geomagnetic energy can occur in. But we have the sort of minor energy lines that are quite localized and can be running through your home. And then we have these massive earth energy dragons. And these are not the gentle energy lines that you may have walked on at a weekend dowsing workshop. Sort of these emperor lines, there are 12 primary emperor lines, and they're like energy rivers that circumnavigate the earth. There are six, what in Chinese term we'd call yang dragons. That's male, solar, directive energy. It's about structure, it's about order. And then there are six yin female lines. They're more lunar. They're about receptivity. They're about creation. They're about chaos. And these great circulating arteries completely circumnavigate the world. They go over various sacred sites that we'll know of, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Giza, plateau of Giza. They meet at different points. This is part of the Earth's grid mechanism. It's not all of it, but the grid is a structure of forms that, in essence, are the mathematical formulations of a sphere. It's what makes the Earth round. And these Earth energies are born in the heart of the Earth. They're born in through the mass, the center of the Earth. This, iron nickel heart, what we believe to be iron and nickel, anyway. And then it sort of rubs through the outer core, or rather, the liquid outer core rubs against the solid inner core, and it gives rise to the Earth energies that come out. And the Emperor Dragons, they're influenced by solar wind, lunar tides, galactic cosmic rays, and they really convert that friction of the within the Earth itself and the Earth moving through space and hitting all these things, or experiencing all these things like solar winds, lunar tides, cosmic rays, this sort of photon fluff that we're now heading into in the universe. And it really, from that friction, it creates this ultra low frequency pressure waves that are so slow, really, that they feel like the heartbeat of something ancient and immense, which of course they are. They're the heartbeat of the Earth in many respects. So these waves of energy now, they concentrate. So it's not like an open sea. We've got general levels of electromagnetic energy. There is like a sea over the whole of the world. But some of these waves, depending on their frequency, concentrate into flowing bands. It's more like a river that they can be hundreds of meters wide. They are dowsable as a gentle but unmistakable flow of energy. And I say Rory Duff, amazing geobiologist, has been mapping these lines for 25, must be 25 years now. Not using dowsing, but also using equipment to measure them. And their frequencies of these energy lines are normally between zero point 0.1 hertz, about-ish. So that's far beneath human hearing because they're composed of almost like sound waves. It's far beneath human hearing, yet they pulse in perfect sympathy, if you like, with the Schumann resonance. So we can't hear them. I feel them personally. It's kind of like I almost hear them. It's almost like a weird kind of pressure noise, and I get a sense of hearing. I know my hearing is kind of activated, but I tend to see these things rather than hear them. So that we've got these 12 lines of energy going around circumnavigating the Earth, and where two or more of them cross, they create what's called a nodal point. So they birth 36 major planetary nodes around the world. So these are like the living energy centers of the Earth, the Earth herself. So we have our energy centers up the spine, or you may call them chakras. So they're the living energy centers of the Earth itself. And these pairs of emperor lines, they sing in harmony. And that when they come into a complete harmony, they're all singing to the same harmonic scale. That happens at solstices and equinoxes. So the entire planet, if you like, becomes one coherent, spinning torus, a big donut of energy because of these lines going around of upgraded consciousness, because they're in harmony with the Schumann resonance. So they affect how we think, because our brain has evolved to live within the Schumann resonance. So this movement of dragons, of one old dragon almost like shedding its skin to give birth to the new dragon, is on a 2,600 year cycle. So that's exactly 1/10 of the precessional 26,000 year cycle of the Earth's wobble. So every 26,000 years, the ruling emperor, sorry, every 2,600 years, this ruling emperor pair of male and female together completes its full harmonic. So this takes him like that long to go around a cycle. And then it hands the baton to the new emperor dragon coming forward. So the outgoing emperor is the one that took the throne about 600 years BC. And it carried with it the frequency of hierarchy, conquest, separation, and really left brain dominance. So it's all about order and structure. And so we have very hierarchical societies. It's not to say we're going to lose hierarchy when this line goes, because nature organizes itself on hierarchies and has always done so. That's how nature works. It's not like when the new emperor dragon comes in, we're suddenly going to be rid of hierarchies. I don't think that's the case at all, because evolution itself is a hierarchy. But it's very much a rigidity in that thinking. And also, almost like, particularly in human society, there's a moral element to this hierarchy that, I'm father of the hierarchy, I'm better than you. I mean, we get that even in nature, don't we? We see that in things like chimp groupings and, well, all in nature. There is a hierarchy. The fittest survive, the weakest don't. But it brought in for humanity, particularly, I would say, then this hierarchy conquest, this view of separation. I'm a separate unit. I'm encased within my body. These are my people. They're separate from your people. And I really, like I said, this left brain dominance of form and structure and order. It was the age of iron, of empires, of conquest, of, all around the world. That's what it was. And that frequency is now collapsing, in real time. And we're seeing that in the geopolitics of the world. We see wars. I'd say we've got these massive schisms between left and right, huge upheaval around the world, everywhere really, Western society particularly, as all our systems and structures and orders that make us what we are under threat from both within and without. So how society forms and the structures in society are also really key to our personal identity. For many years, I was actually a sociologist and psychologist, and the formation of our identity is based not so much necessarily on things within ourselves often, but on a deep level, our society is formed as a reflection of everything around us. How people treat us, even whether we're born in an urban or a rural environment, affects our identity. We take everything that we view out there and we sort of mirror it within ourselves. So if our identity is based upon things often that are out there, as much as what we know to ourselves to be true, I value certain things. I have soul values, but nonetheless, I am also still partly created by stuff out there. So when stuff out there starts to fall apart, that affects the deepest layers of our human psyche. When things that we often think about in society as somehow just happen, we kind of have forgotten a lot, really, how much society is created by man ourselves. Why we have the working week, why we have education, why we have healthcare. They're not sort of God-given. They're because we have evolved to have these things because we recognise the benefit to them of creating stable, happy, healthy, cohesive societies. Then those institutions perhaps start to become corrupted because we as a species have started to, or a society, have started to lose our way. As they say good times create weak men create hard times, and all the rest of it. So we kind of lose our way. But this is the push and pull of this yin and yang energy all the time. Because the masculine energy is all about order, form, and structure, but it can become too controlling and restrictive. The feminine energy is all about creation and receptivity, but it can also create chaos and anarchy. So our job is to constantly walk the tightrope between those two forces within ourselves, yin and yang. I don't want to become my own tyrant, and then I don't want to respond to that tyrannical, controlling nature by becoming chaotic and anarchic. I've got to be able to have order and form and structure in my life and room for creativity, and the two need to feed off each other. That happens to us on an individual and a societal level. And our job is to walk that line between this order and chaos all the time. And I think we have, we talk in society about all toxic masculinity, but there's equally, I would say, as much toxic femininity about this. There's the devouring mother as well as the controlling father, if you like, in society. So when these two are at loggerheads, things will collapse. And it may be that we've reached that point because this emperor dragon, that has this hierarchy, conquest, separation, and left brain dominance is coming to an end, because it won't just affect that yang energy. Because yin and yang works in pairs, it will bring about the death, if you like, of the female equivalent. So in a way, both then start to display their worst characteristics rather than their better. And then in response to that, of course, we take a big look at society and go, well, this is pretty shit. We need to do something about this. And then as, evolution, the next generation come through and go, well, that's not the world I want to live in. So the incoming, so that's the old emperor dragon of this, like I said, hierarchy, conquest, separation, left brain dominance. That's kind of going, and we will see this in geopolitical strains. We'll see it in our institutions collapsing. We may even see it in things like, because of the bigger activities in the cosmos, we'll see volcanic and earthquake activity, and in astrology we may even see landmass changes. So there are big things afoot at the moment. We're at a big crux moment, and so the incoming emperor dragon, which began to be sort of faintly dowsable around about 2018-19, and I would say actually in before that, because I see energy lines, I see these waves of bands of energy. You could see something emerging out the middle. So it's like you've got all these different waves, and then it's almost like the end one started to die off, and new one started to come out the middle. And the energy of that middle bit was very different than the energy of the edges. So this new Emperor Dragon coming in, it's gathering power month by month, and it carries with it an entirely different sound frequency. So I say, if you stood on the old Emperor Dragons, it was like, we're going to go conquer the world, create an empire. This new one is more about coherence. It's more about togetherness. It's more about being sympathetic and empathic, and I mean empathic in the truest sense of the word, rather than empathy from your own trauma, which is another whole other debate. It has much more of a multi-dimensional perception. So we look at how everything is interconnected. And I think, again, we see that in society. We've got to this point now where we realise, on the global stage, politics is all interconnected. Our food chains are all interconnected. Where we get our power from, we buy water from another country, electricity from another country. Everything is interconnected. And that was sort of this newness starting to emerge. That, in its own birth, of course, in that way, is not going to be without its problems, because almost like the thing that is born with the essence of its own demise written in it. So it's a really interesting phenomena, but we've got this sort of more entwined. And I think we're seeing that in the spiritual movements. More people are now being drawn into things like quantum consciousness, quantum gravity, how everything is interconnected, how consciousness is right down on, is created on the plasma level, and so we're seeing this exploration of how everything is interconnected, multidimensional, and just the birth of this new dragon, while it's young and we'll see it will restore balance, I think, between the divine masculine and the divine feminine. Because in the old dragon, like I said, both of them have started to display almost their worst characteristics. And as this one beds in, I think we'll see them coming back together again in a much more happier marriage. So by roughly 2032, this new dragon's going to be sort of fully birthed. But really, the loudest, rawest, I suppose, and most alchemical years of transition are the ones we're in now. They're the ones that we're in, that there were 2024, 2025, 2026, and 2027. That's really where the old dragon dies and the new one comes into being. So, like I said, 2024 was the first year where these lines became measurable, and the new dragon, won't be really bedded in until about 2032. That's how long this cycle of energy will take. So 2025, this year, really is the peak overlap year of both decay and quickening maximum volume. So as one is really dying, as it's hit that arc, it's in the curve, the growth curve is the other way. So it's very dynamic. We've got this powerful death, but also this powerful birth at the same time. So it's the year when old structures will crack the loudest, wail in their death throes in the most painful way. You know, we're watching the death scene in many respects of a bad actor who's going to, gasping for their last breath. But we're also seeing this new template flood the reality. So we've got this conflict. Birthing anything is never easy. The birthing process itself, which women experience, will know that it's painful, it's messy, it's bloody. It is both constricted, and then at the end you just get this new birth. So 2026 and 27 are going to be hopefully more about stabilization when the new emperor settles into the crust of the earth, if you like, and the remnants of the old paradigm, the old way of thinking, start finally to finish dissolving. Because these emperors, because they resonate the Schumann resonance, that is the resonance, say, of the human brainwaves. We think in accordance with these emperor dragons. So we have thought about, we've lived in a left brain world and thought about, conquest and hierarchy. It's how we've structured everything. That's not to say that we can't live. It's not to say that we can live without hierarchy, because then we'll probably tip into anarchy. But we're going to have to structure things very differently. We're going to have to live very differently. We're going to have to learn to live with each other in different ways. So we got this new harmonic coming in. And it's really interesting because we are now coming up to the winter solstice, obviously. So every solstice, every equinox, is when the dragons, all the dragons around the world, come into harmonic. They come into a harmonic frequency. And this is sort of like this window is like a gear click, if you like, in the great cosmic clock. So if you imagine the old clockwork mechanism, you've got lots of different gears, lots of different cogs, lots of different clicks. You could say the Earth is in the middle, or the moon is a wheel that goes around us, and this whole thing goes around the sun, and then the sun's in this cosmic cycle of the solar system, which of course is in the universe and our end of the galaxy, and blah blah. So there's all these different mechanisms. And on the smallest scale, we feel that in our lives, in the vegetational cycle and the solar cycles, the Celtic wheel. So we'll look for the solstices and the equinoxes. We look for the new moons and the full moons, because they're all where one of these little gear clicks falls into place. They're a chance for us to embody these energies. So the entire handover of one emperor dragon to another is not one dramatic moment. It's a sort of symphonic overlapping of frequencies. We're going from one part of the choir to another, if you like. And each gateway gives us an opportunity, another chance to release what belongs in the outgoing age and embody what belongs in the incoming age. So for each of us personally, we have to decide, what's the society we want to live in? What does that look like? What are its values? Because those values, are what keeps society cohesive. We attract people of similar values to ourselves in our own world. We have to decide what systems and structures in society do we want to see, and what do they look like? What does law and order look like? What does justice look like? What does education look like? What does health actually mean? Mental, physical, otherwise. Where does spirituality and religion sit within these things? Because we have to know what we want in life for our friends, for our family, for our relationships, for our career. How do we sit in the world, both individually and collectively? These are the turning of the cogs for us on a day-to-day basis. How can I live in accordance with my values? How can I contribute to society that I want to live in? How can I attract like-minded people around me? Where are these people? So this is how we experience on a daily basis. It's how we conceptualize the world. And this planetary mechanism, as I say, is nested in much larger cycles that are all turning at the same time. So we experience in our own lives, we experience the passage of time, the months, the year, the moons, the phases of our life. So, and there are the if you think about break down the 2,600 year cycle of these emperor dragons, there are 650 quarter cycles that also within that mark the rise and fall of civilization. So think about the Renaissance, the fall of Rome, the Black Death. They were all at these pivotal moments and where something, seismic occurs, and we are at one of those pivotal moments. And then there are the 10,400 year half precession loops that sort of coincide with the sudden thawing of freezing of continents, for instance. That's the half precession of the larger precession of the Earth. And then there is the full 2,600 precessional cycle. That slowly changes which stars rise with the spring equinox, how our heavens change, what we look at night. And this really quietly, that bigger cycle quietly rewrites the sort of mythic operating system of humanity, what we believe. Because humanity has always looked to the heavens for answers, really. We don't think that we're doing it now, but we are. So, we looked, that's why, ancient sites are, always plotting, the sunrise, the sunsets, the equinoxes, the movement of the planets. This, we have always looked to the stars for answers. In a way, we're doing it in now with like Elon Musk's not rush, drive to say humanity is, we want to get to Mars. Well, in a way, that's the modern way of looking at the stars for answers, but we're saying the answers must be out there. But actually, the answers are within. So, beyond our planet, likewise, we have the solar cycle 26 is climbing, total cycle is climbing to, blah, 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 beyond our planet. That's what I'm trying to say. Get my words out in a minute. Solar cycle 26 is climbing towards what looks to be set as one of the fiercest maxima in recorded history. And that will happen around 2030, 2032. And there'll be a pouring for that. There'll be a pouring of coronal plasma straight into the emperor lines. And they'll be literally light them up like fiber optic cables. So when that happens, that's to say, that's when it's fully bedded in. So in that, it's almost like the old is dying. It's like the great grandparent holding the newborn. The old is dying, the new one is coming in. And when the older generation's gone, this new one is in its infancy for a few years, and then all this energy beds it in and it becomes an energy, a fully formed emperor dragon. And our entire solar system at the moment is moving in a photon-rich cloud of interstellar material as we approach the galactic equatorial plane. The full crossing is centuries away. It's not gonna, you haven't got to get the kettle on and pack a bag or anything. But the pressure wave, it's the local fluff, if you like, is already here, and it's thinning the heliosphere and accelerating evolution in every living system. So we are under all these cosmic influences that are affecting us, even the Earth's own heartbeat. The Schumann resonance, and that bathes every cell of our bodies because we have evolved to live in the Schumann resonance since we started, however long ago that was. Again, that's a whole other conversation. But that's really moved away from its old 7.83 hertz baseline, and now regularly spikes at sustained 40 plus hertz gamma bands. I mean, that's massive. That's like we were aligned to live in a certain field, and now we've got our fingers stuck in the socket. So that 40 plus hertz gamma bands themselves, because how they affect the neurochemistry in our brain, our pineal gland, that frequency is associated with peak states of insight and compassion and unity conscious. Unity consciousness is when we cease to feel this line of separation between ourselves and the universe. And I think to fully understand that, you've got to have had some kind of unity consciousness experience. I mean, people talk about it. People experience it when they take things like magic mushrooms or ayahuasca or through deep meditational states where you've done like breathing exercises to stimulate the pineal gland and things like that. But it's basically, and it's something I've experienced all my life. It's basically when, right now, you're sat there and you're thinking, this is me in my body. I'm looking out from my eyes. This is me. I understand I've got an aura, but it's a bit, can't really feel it. And I know that I am separate from everything else. All I've got is my own thoughts. I can't hear or sense something else. Unity consciousness is when that barrier between yourself and the universe breaks down and you are at one with the universe. And it is the most euphoric feeling of love and ecstasy you will ever feel. And once you've felt it, it will change you forever. And it will change how you look at the world. It will change how you behave. So that this now we are people are going to probably need outlets to experience that because it's not going to happen by accident because our brains aren't wired for it as a normal state of play, but it's probably going to become easier to achieve with the right mechanism because up until now it's quite hard to achieve unity consciousness and interestingly particularly in Western societies. It's my cat scratching the sofa. Um, because a fascinating study was done on this as an aside that, if people were Buddhist monks, in the Tibetan mountains, for instance, they can achieve unity consciousness much easier than someone who has been a Tibetan monk for the same amount of time, but for instance, in Scotland. And Serena Rooney Dougal did an amazing study on this. And it wasn't, it's not just the mechanism of going into deep states. It's actually the whole thing was about our belief system about the world affected our ability to achieve that, and also our geography because of the earth energy. So anyway, I digress. So we've got all these different things going on, all these different cycles, all of it turning together. All of it is turning you. And you might feel it in sort of pressure in the head so that you won't sleep because the neurochemistry is changing in your brain, different frequencies evolving. So this normal circadian rhythms that we had can become interrupted. You might experience it as an expansion in the heart chakra. So you can feel saddened. You can feel a level of grief. You can feel a level of uneasiness on a personal level. And that will be about things that have happened in your own life. But also you can look at, like I said, to a degree, we're looking around societies in the West and going, my God, it used to be great, and now it's rubbish. And then you might feel pains about that, and you might experience like of memories from childhood and things rising that you need to process, or further back, past life memories, and there could be no apparent trigger, but you might find yourself constantly going down memory road. Oh, weren't things great? Oh, weren't things lovely? But that's because there's a death of reality occurring. We have to grief. There's a grief that belongs to really, it's a grief that belongs to an entire epoch, really, of humanity, rather than your personal story, because we're caught up in much bigger cycles. So we're seeing this death of this epoch of humanity, and our grief stories are tied up in that death. The old order is collapsing, institutions, governments, geopolitics, it's all going. The reality that we grew up in is going. So we're experiencing grief. So we'll experience our personal memories, but we also will experience that collectively. And then we're experiencing that collectively. That will put strain on groups. It will put strain on everything from, family groups to societal groups to and there's all sorts of groups within society, but so it'll put strain on that, everything from nations to political allegiances to whatever industries that are suddenly going up in smoke. So these are the moments really when the sort of colours of the world become almost unbearably vivid. And without doubt, we know without doubt, don't we, that we're infinitely larger really than we've almost been permitted to believe. We know that we're made for more than we currently showing up in life. Many of us feel that there's always more that we can do. So therefore, there's this grief of everything that we held dear and to be stable is falling away. And we can't yet see what wants to emerge. So this crossover of the dragons is like the winter solstice. When we go into the winter solstice, that's the dark night of the soul. We have to let go of everything that no longer serves us. We have to have a bonfire of our vanities almost, a bonfire of our identities that might say, well, I've always been the stoic one, but I don't want to be the stoic one anymore. I don't want to be the one that all the family members come to in crisis. They're grown up. They can deal with a bloody crisis too. This is the time where we have to let go of things. So, what this Emperor Dragon 3 years like, it's like a protracted dark night of the soul. So each time when we hit that winter, it's like a double whammy. So we have the Emperor Dragon, it's in its death knells at his arc, but we're on a smaller cycle. So we go spring, summer, autumn, winter, spring, summer, autumn, winter, and we're hitting that dark night at the top. And that means that each winter through this crossover, the more we can shed and the more we can release, ready to make space for the new order, however was going to emerge, we can only do ourselves a service by doing that. We are in this dark night of the soul, of the death of one emperor dragon as the new one comes in, and we are entering the winter solstice. We'll have another winter solstice yet, like I said before, the new dragon comes in. But this, and in that darkness, we can't yet see what wants to be birthed in our own lives. We can't yet see what wants to be birthed in society, in humanity's life. We have to sit and hold in patience, but we do have to hold the seeds and the image of something that we want to be rebirthed. And we can't sit there and say, oh, it'll all just work out, because then we're not actively co-creating. We're sitting there and watching. We need to watch a bit, yeah. But as soon as we feel the impetus to move, we need to act on that. Because if we don't move, someone else will and fill that void. Someone else will create the reality we're going to be living in. And this is why we need to be actively co-creating our own life. Because if you don't actively co-create it with these forces, energetic forces of the earth, somebody else will. And then you'll find you're living in their vision. And I personally would rather live in mine. So, collectively, we need to come together as, people and work out what that vision is going to look like. And that's not going to be an easy process. So the new emperor, is threading this higher harmonic through our bones at the moment while the old one dissolves. And that's going to be, that's going to be tough to ready to move through this process of this higher vibration coming in. So we've got to go through that birthing process in our own lives over the next few years of, as I say, of this, we've got this more cohesive togetherness, more multidimensional, almost like a richer life. Because I think for many years now, with the end of this cycle, people they've almost been living surface level lives. I get up in the morning, I go to work, I come home, I sleep. I'm supposed to get in 10,000 steps. I'm supposed to have hobbies, have pets, Instagram ready house, but it's all been surface level stuff. It's like, where's the real meaning in my life? I want to get closer to nature. I want to have a family. I want to have chickens. I mean, it doesn't mean you want to give up modernity, because we can't go back to subsistence living. That's bloody hard. And yeah, I want chickens, but I also want the internet, So, because it does bring many advantages for us, or at least I want electricity and running water, So we can't go back, we don't want to go back to subsistence living, but we really want to be clear of what kind of life we want to usher in. And people say, well, what do I need to do? You just have to stay awake, and you just have to be willing, and you just have to be mindful of what your values are, what you hold dear. Who are the people you're attracting to? How are you living your values in real life? So if you look at Brené Brown, she's got a list of values that people hold that are collective to, society. We all hold some of those values. Those, if you look at them, if you feel them, those are your soul values. You won't have the whole list, but some of them will really speak to you. Our job as a soul is to embody those values. That's what we came here to do. When we embody those values, that means we're really taking care of ourselves as a soul. And that's when we start to get everything that we need in life. We can have everything we need in life, regardless of what's going on out there geopolitically and all the rest of it, if we take care of ourselves. And taking care of ourselves means understanding our soul values. And then we're able to capitalize on the energy of the earth, whatever emperor dragons we have reigning, if you like, because we're living our full soul values, then we taking care of ourselves, then no matter what the energy is, we will be supported. So we don't need fancy rituals. You don't necessarily need right affirmations. You don't, you just need to know what you want. What do you want in your family? What do you want in your relationships? What do you want in your education, your career? What makes what gives you a fulfilling and value-filled life? And when you embody those values, you attract the same like-minded people who have those values to you. So you find your tribe. So this is something to be mindful of. So you don't, you can journal this, you can do those kind of things, but it's really important that you get a clear vision of what you want your life to look like as this old regime is dying, so that we then collectively, so we individually we can act on our own life, but then we contribute to a collective that is all moving in the same direction. So, because we're wired in. The newer dragon is not moving through the earth and it's moving through us because we are participating in the process. And that process began long before we were born and continued long after we are gone. But the Emperor Dragon, if you like, that song line that feeds in, that has a knock-on effect onto other energy lines. Let's say the emperor dragons are the arteries. Then you've got veins and capillaries. So energy lines are like that in the landscape. You've got major emperor dragons, and you've got other lines, you've got tiny lines, little thin lines. But that frequency is fed down. That energy of the emperor dragons is fed down to the major and medium lines and minor lines, like what's in your arteries. The blood in your arteries gets fed into your veins and capillaries. So that energy then gets shifted through the landscape. And then we pick up on that. We pick up on that through our aura because our aura is not separate from the geomagnetic field. Our aura is not like an eggshell and we bush up against the Earth's energy. Our aura bleeds into the Earth's energy and the Earth energy comes into our aura. We draw a lot of our energy and our aura from the ground. So our aura is not separate from the geomagnetic field. The geomagnetic field on the Earth is not separate from the solar wind. The solar wind is not separate from the pressure wave of the galactic arm. So when the Emperor Dragon changes, that's because of cosmic changes. And then when the Emperor Dragons change, we change. We are the generation that gets to be conscious inside the turning of the 2,600-year wheel and inside the 26,000-year wheel, inside a solar maximum, inside the breadth of the galaxy itself. So it's about digging deep and think, why did I come here now? Why did I choose to be here at this moment? What did I come to offer the world at this pivotal moment of change? What did I come to experience? So, we have lessons that we come in, our karma, if you like, but we also have our dharma, what we're meant to be doing. So, our karma is usually the roadblocks in the way to achieving our dharma. We have to overcome that. But to really move through that, we have to understand ourselves. Because the Emperor Dragons, their change is ushering us in to embody ourselves more fully. Our soul's journey is to be as much of ourselves as our soul as we intended to be and not let life get in the way. So, there has not been a convergence like this really since the Ice Age and the mammoths walked the earth. So we are at a crux moment. And therefore, it's kind of a privilege to experience this. It may have its trials and tribulations, but nonetheless, it's still a privilege to experience it. So now is the time to, go with the flow. See it as an exciting journey rather than something to be overwhelmed by, because you chose to be here. And the living earth is not doing this, to us. We're here to do it with the earth. The earth is doing this change as us. We came to experience this. So this shift in Emperor Dragons is a crux moment for us over the next few years. And yeah, I think we will see huge problems societally, and on astrological way, there will be earthquakes. We may even see landmass changes. The wonderful Pam Gregory has spoken about this. So it is a pivotal moment of human consciousness, and we get to decide how whether we want to go with that flow and embrace it, or whether we want to try and cling on to something that's dying anyway. The Emperor Dragons are changing. There's no going back. You can't bring something back. So it's better to try and understand ourselves better and what we came to contribute and what we want the world to look like, and then work on ourselves and try and embody our soul values as much as we can. So the Emperor Dragons, yeah, are ushering in tremendous change at the moment. And this is what we're seeing. We're seeing this, the old systems collapsing. That's why it can be terrifying to look at the news. But it's a huge opportunity for us to create something that could actually be so much better. And to do that, we can't be in a place of fear and restriction and separation. We've got to be in a place of collaboration and, sovereignty and power. And this is what it's calling us to embody at the moment. So, yeah, that's my fourth penneth worth. A bit long and a bit rambling today. So thank you for those of you who stayed with me. Yeah, and I'd love to hear your take on this changing of the guard, if you like, this change of Emperor Dragons. Yeah, how's it showing up for you? So thanks for joining me, and I will see you again next time.